Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Cramlington, Bedlington and Seaton Valley Local Area Council on Wednesday, the 17th of November 2021. We're looking at today's agenda. What I'm going to do is just start off on item 1, but after the first few lines, I'm going to then pass that further down with it being a planning item. So, with regards to that first item, just going to announce that the meeting is being held in a COVID-safe environment, and it is available to view on live stream through YouTube on Northumberland TV. Members are asked to keep microphones on mute unless speaking. The rest of this item I will move to later on when we deal with the planning item. Item 2 is apologies for absence. Heather, do we have apologies, please?
Yes, Councillors Bowman, Dunbar, Ferguson, Flux and Wilczek.
Thank you. Could I just say at that point, I'm sure we all agree to pass on our congratulations to Councillor Wilczek for her good news and best wishes for her family as well. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. If I could just ask if we could go through the minutes just page by page. We'll start with page 3, page 4, page 5. Councillor Daly.
On page 5 of the minutes, where it says Policing and Community Safety Update, and it says resolved that the information be noted. Can I just ask, apart from noting, are we doing anything else in terms of this particular item? It's a point of clarity, really, on this.
Could you just point out where on the page that is, please?
This is...
Oh, right on the bottom, yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Are there any... What I'm effectively asking is, are there any tangible actions coming out of that discussion that we've had, other than noting?
I think this was in relation to the visit by the police, is that correct? Yeah. I'm aware that in Cramlington, we've recently received some information from the police there with regards to the promotion of the Speedwatch campaign, and that has been cascaded along across the local councillors. And I know myself has been asked if that can be advertised more widely to promote that campaign. I'm not sure whether that's more widely across any of the other areas across Cramlington, Bedlington, across Bedlington or Seaton Valley. But that is something that the police are keen to promote so that the public are more involved and it creates more awareness with regards to that. Is there anything further that you can think of that we can promote on there?
Have we got any further meetings planned with the police at this committee, Chair?
We will hope that we can have something more regular with the police themselves, but I'm aware that we already have in the diary for the Police and Crime Commissioner to visit in January. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11 and page 12. We agree those minutes? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, item 4, disclosure of members' interest. Do we have any items which have not been previously disclosed which need to be brought up at this meeting? No. Thank you. Item 5, determination of planning applications. So this is in relation to agenda item 5, which is an information item, but I do just want to highlight halfway down page 13 is the key issues. Each application has its own particular set of individual issues and considerations that must be taken into account when determining the application. These are set out in the individual reports contained in the next section of this agenda. Every item, every planning application is considered on its own merits. And I think that's important to take into consideration. So we move on to item 6. Before we do that, just bringing into context item 1, which is on there. and this outlines the process for planning applications. The process is that the Chair introduces the application. There are site visits videos, which is previously circulated. Then the Planning Officer updates changes to recommendations or presents the reports. There's public speaking, which is the objector up to 5 minutes, local member up to 5 minutes, the applicant, supporter up to 5 minutes. There's no questions in relation to written representations or of by local councillors. The committee members, questions to planning officers. The debate and the rules of the debate are the proposal, seconded, debate. Chairman responds to raised hands of members as to whether they wish to participate in the debate. There's no speeches until the proposal is seconded. The speech may not exceed 6 minutes. Amendments to motions, approve, refuse or defer, and then a vote, and by majority or chair's casting vote. Are we all clear on that? Thank you. So with that in mind, item 6, it's a planning application to be considered today. Application number 20/03863/Verico. Proposal is for variation of conditions 2, materials, and 3, approved plans pursuant to Planning Permission 18/00515/FUL in order to install a flat roof rather than a pitched roof. The address is 41A, Southward, Seaton Sluice, Whitley Bay, Northumberland, NE 26 4DQ. Before I pass you over to the Planning Officer, can I just check that everyone is in receipt of the videos that were emailed out? Okay, thank you. I'll pass you over to Richard Lawton, the Planning Officer, to go through this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members will recall that the application was considered at committee in July alongside the change of use application for a childminding business, which was temporarily approved for 2 years. So to recap, the re-extension to 41A Southward had not been constructed in accordance with the approved plans, and the applicant is seeking retrospective approval through a variation of condition planning application. However, the development did not accord with planning policy and was recommended for refusal. The current application also proposes a side external staircase and a front porch. Members deferred the application until November to allow the applicants more time to consider making changes to the scheme. There have been no amended plans received. As such, the application is being brought back to committee with an unchanged recommendation for refusal. I'll try and quickly go through the application just again to remind everyone. The semi-detached property is within the residential area of Seaton Sluice that is largely made up of other semi-detached properties, and the recent satellite image just shows the property and the re-extension in context with the surrounding area. This is the previous permission that was approved, and the plans highlight the previous permission in 2018 were not adhered to. A condition was attached to this permission that states that except where modified by the conditions attached to the plan permission, the development shall be carried out in accordance with the submitted drawings. These plans were deemed acceptable as it includes a pitch roof that relates to the character of the existing property and also reduces the impact to the adjoining neighbour. And these are the floor plans of the previous permission that show the full width of the ground floor extension, which accommodates the play area for the childminding business, and then a smaller bedroom on the first floor. These are the proposed floor plans for the current application. Again, there is the open plan playroom serving the childminding business, but the separate living space for the dwelling and first floor. The concerns with the roof design and scale of the first floor therefore only impacts the private living space of the occupants and not the area for the childminding business. I mean, it is quite difficult to see the plans, but I'll go through them. And the plans show the current flat roof, 2-storey extension across the full width of the rear wall and beyond the height of the existing eaves of the property, and the side elevation shows the external staircase leading to the first floor door. And these are the front elevations showing the small porch with a rendered finish. The site photographs give a better indication, obviously, of what's currently being built. The photo was taken from the re-elevation from Elwyn Close. This highlights the imposing mass of the extension and flat roof that is highly visible from the street. This shows a close-up of the extension and neighbouring properties to the north, facing onto a two-storey blank gable wall, projecting 3.5 metres along the shared boundary. This photograph demonstrates the shadow casting over the neighbouring property that impacts the garden and the habitable windows, ground floor and first floor, due to the height, mass and proximity of the two-storey extension. The site extension remains incomplete due to awaiting the determination of the planning application. The photograph to the right shows the first floor external door as a fire escape, and external staircase has not yet been installed. There's a photograph of the front elevation that remains incomplete, with the plans proposing a porch and also plans for a rendered finish to the side extension. The recommendation is for refusal as per the report. However, the amended wording is being changed to include the impact to the external staircase. So just to go through it, the refusal one should read as the two-storey re-extension and proposed external staircase, by virtue of their siting, scale, mass and design, do not respect or complement the style and character of the existing dwelling and constitute incongruous additions to the street scene, resulting in significant harm to the visual amenities of the locality. This would be contrary to policies DC1, DC28 of the Blythe Valley District Local Plan Framework, Development Control Policies, Development Plan Document 2007, Policy NV2 of the Blythe Valley Core Strategy, and the NPPF. And the second refusal reason reads as the two-storey re-extension, by virtue of its siting, scale, mass and height, results in significant adverse impact on the amenity of the occupiers of the adjoining property at 39A Southward in terms of an unacceptable loss of daylight, sunlight, visual outlook, structural proximity and overbearing presence, and the proposed external staircase would result in significant harm to the amenities of the occupiers of the neighbouring property at 41 Southward by virtue of increased overlooking of the re-elevation and rear garden. This would be contrary to policies DC1, DC28 of the Blythe Valley District Local Development Framework, Development Control Policies, Development Plan Document 2007 and the NPPF. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, no objectors or local power councillor, but we do have the applicant who wishes to speak. Okay. You ready? Okay. So if you want to press your button on there till it lights up. Thank you. You have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee, for providing us with the opportunity to address you all once again. Members will recall that a decision at the meeting in July this year was deferred to allow us as applicants time to consider making changes to the extension. However, the plans before you are those that were considered in the committee earlier this year. Since that meeting, there have been no further objections to our application. No further comments have been made by the occupants of 41 Southward, with the occupants, my husband's parents, having now sold the property and relocated, drawn an end to their persistent attacks on our family, continued efforts to provide much needed childcare for families from the village. With the exception of an objection from our aggrieved relatives, there are no further objections to our application from any residents or consultees. We still believe that the proposed extension would not result in any adverse impact on our neighbours, let alone a significant adverse impact, as the officer's report suggests. We have consulted with our neighbour from the outset of the process, and at no point have there been any formal objections to our plans. We are now over 2 years since its construction, and the lack of objection is something we feel backs up our view of a lack of impact on them. Both properties enjoy a good outlook, caused by the gap in the building line at the west of the property where the car park is. Daytime and evening sunshine is therefore largely unaffected by the extension, and whilst photos in the presentation show some shadowing, the effect of this is only short-lived, and for half an hour or more or so than is usual, as the properties are lined north to south. We still believe that the extension is entirely appropriate to its surroundings. It is constructed of matching materials and finished to a high standard. Comments that the extension would be incongruous with the street scene continue to ignore the fact that a number of properties nearby have flat roof extensions, including a full-width flat roof dormer to our neighbours just 2 doors down. Extensions with flat roofs and dormer windows with flat roofs have also been approved very recently by officers, including at 21 Granville Avenue, 11 Budworth Avenue and 15 Malvern Road within our estate. Further properties on the estate have also received planning permission for raised balconies, most recent of which at 4 Malvern Road involved a balcony on both front and rear elevations. We strongly believe that the design of our extension is in keeping with the property and the character of the estate. There are numerous examples of similar proposals very nearby, a growing proportion of which have been granted planning permission, whilst others are more historic. The school itself is entirely flat-roofed and is synonymous with the character and age of the estate. Our proposal would therefore be in keeping with its surroundings and would not appear out of place for a very limited number of views it can be seen, as the report suggests. Each application must be assessed on its own merits, and the issues being put forward in the report are entirely subjective. Whilst we are respectful of the officers' opinions, we hope the committee agree with us and recognise that our proposal follows the established pattern of building for the estate and is an acceptable response to our property and the street in which we live. Finally, I would like to add, the Council Building Control Inspector was fully aware of the deviation of plans and, as per his responsibilities, never advised us correctly or followed the correct protocol laid down by the Department of Communities and Local Government Building Control Standards, enforcing a stop order, informing the Planning Department, or client, ourselves. He instead told us to carry on and he would sign it off if there were no objections, putting us in this position now. This application has attracted no objections from neighbours, and we kindly ask that the committee find it within themselves to grant planning permission here today. Thank you.
Okay. Can I just add one more thing, please? We are self-builders. We didn't, to save money, obviously, we've done it ourselves, right? I'm not a builder, but I took a bricklaying course to actually build the extension myself. I'm actually a qualified nurse. And we were we paid for the service from the council building inspector because we thought they would be the best ones to go with. And I did explain, I says, oh, what would be the score if we went further across and we put a flat roof on? His exact words to me were, as long as your neighbour doesn't complain, I will sign it off, right? Richard over there has also indicated to my wife over the phone when I was witness that if there'd been no objections, you would have had it signed off and
nobody would have been
and no one would have been any other wiser. Now, with guidelines like that, where does the public actually stand? And as committee members, councillors, it's your obligation to stamp this out through the council, because we could be in big financial hardship, right? Having to change all this for the simple reason that we were given the wrong advice from people who actually work for the council.
Okay, 5 minutes is up, thank you.
Well, 2 seconds,
No,
right?
5 minutes is up, sorry. You're allowed 5 minutes, that's the regulations. Okay, so we now move to members' questions to planning officers. Does anyone have any questions, please? Yes, Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to ask who brought this back to committee at this time and why?
Members decided to bring it back. It was because to give them an opportunity to amend the plans and see if they can come up with a new design, if possible. As I say, there's been no amended plans, so we're still looking exactly the same proposal as in July.
I'm a bit bamboozled, because I was one of the people that said we should give them some breathing space. And it's going to be a difficult decision tonight, but the time we gave them was 12 months, I believe.
Sorry, there was a separate application which was the change of use for the child manning business. That was given the temporary permission for two years. And this is the separate application for the actual external works to the rear, and that was deferred to give an opportunity to try and see if they could change the plans.
Yeah, but it was deferred for 12 months, was it not?
No, it
We
was
give
deferred
them
until-
12 months to come up with an alternative, either to move their business or make this building suitable, along with the wishes of the plan department.
Councillor Robinson, it was deferred until November for them to discuss come to us to discuss alternative designs on the extension. The other application was granted a temporary planning permission for 2 years to give them time to look for alternative premises. So it was 3 months for the extension, and it was 2 years for the temporary permission for the change of use.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more questions for the planning officer? Councillor Taylor.
How many objections are still noted on this plan application, please?
There was an objection from the neighbour, but obviously just hearing from the applicant, they've actually now moved. I mean, this is what actually started the whole application off. It was an enforcement case that was notified by the neighbour. But yeah, they've actually since moved away. I don't want to obviously speculate what the reason was. But as I say, there's been no objection from really anyone else.
Is there somebody living in the property next door now, do we know? Or is it empty?
I don't know. I've just based on what the applicants just mentioned in their 5-minute speech.
I'm just a little bit concerned that if we go ahead and if we want to grant this today, we're then going to, if the house is sitting empty just now, then we're going to then get maybe something in a couple of months if there's somebody else moved in. Is it a privately owned property next door? Do we know that?
I can't really say, to be honest. I don't know. What I would say is that we can't just base the application on who objects and who doesn't. It's a material consideration, don't get me wrong. We have to obviously look at this in terms of its design and impact to the neighbours on its own merit as well. In terms of the neighbours, I don't know who.
Well, no, that's what I'm thinking of, because of the size of it and the fact that we've seen the photograph where there's a shadow cast over next doors. And yes, the lady did explain that it's only for a certain time in the day. But my concerns are that if we then look at this, we need to look at it in the round for anybody who moves next door, who's living next door. We've got to be conscious that this is still going to affect this. It's going to affect their lifestyle and how they live in that property. So go ahead and grant it.
Just to clarify as well, the objection wasn't from the adjoining neighbour; it was actually from the neighbour to the south. But you're right. You've got to consider the future occupants, not just who currently lives there as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. When I'm thinking about it and remembering this application, it wasn't just the flat roof, it was the fact that there was a 2-storey extension right across, and the original application was for a 1-storey half next door to the neighbour. So we can't actually give permission for a flat roof, can we? That size, because it shouldn't be that size in the first place.
Chair, just to put a bit of context around that, I mean, if you feel like you want to grant planning permission for this, you can. But I think what the point is this is against any planning policies that we have, any planning support and guidance that we have. This is the issue. That's why the scheme that was approved was acceptable in planning terms. This is a big block on the back of the house, which does impact on the neighbour. No matter who lives there, that extension is going to be there for a lot of years to come. And it does impact on the people next door. It's much larger than what we would consider acceptable in terms of its scale, size, massing for rear extensions. Ground floor, yes, is different. You can have something at ground floor, that projects that this is, which is more acceptable. But at 2-storey, there is an impact, and we always advise that they pull it in from the boundary when it's a semi-detached house, which is what the approved plan shows, and to put that pitched roof on, because all guidance, generally speaking, doesn't support flat roofs. We know in other areas of the county there are flat roofed extensions on the much older properties, terrace properties, and it's the built form for the age of that property. And it would look odd in a lot of those cases to then put a pitched roof on something. A lot of them had grants many years ago, and a lot of them got this 2-storey rear flat roof extensions. So that is the built form. So when you look at it in context, the flat roofs work in those areas, but not so much in this type area. I mean, the lady there did mention a couple of addresses. I didn't catch them all. I did catch one of them. I've had a look, and it's a 2-storey extension, but it is a pitched roof. There's a small flat roof dormer on the back, so it's not the same as this. In planning terms, it just far exceeds anything in terms of its size, scale, massing that we would normally accept. So that's why, obviously, you know, we're recommending refusal. If members support that recommendation, there is still the opportunity for the applicants to appeal that decision. They may win their appeal on it, but as it stands in planning terms, under planning policy, we cannot support it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hazel-Sherwin.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just exploring whether we have the concept of precedence. You know, in law courts, if there is a precedence, then they go by that case and they will allow similar cases to go through. This application seems to have been rejected because it violates DC1 and DC28. Suppose, hypothetically speaking, if we let it go through, will we be opening a can of worms? Because there will be other applicants who will be in a similar situation who would come back and say, right, you allowed this despite the violations of DC1 and DC28. So why can't we do the same thing for us? So I'm concerned about that.
Chair, no, it's each case is assessed on its own merits. We don't work off precedent, so just because one has it doesn't mean that the next will as well. Each case is assessed on its own merits. No, if this was approved and another identical application came in for 2 doors up, we would still, our position wouldn't change.
Thank you. Just add, it does make our life a bit more difficult, though, if something goes through that we necessarily don't agree with, because it could change the character of that area. So it's not as, Julie's absolutely right what she's saying, you have to assess this on its own merits. It just makes our life a bit more difficult if there's something else already there. But I would say, just obviously what Julie says, just assess on this, what you see in front of you now.
If I understand correctly, in theory, it shouldn't affect us, but in practice, it might affect.
I think it can't depends. I mean, we've had applications where over time, extensions have been added over a long period of time, and that has changed the character of an area. So it can be difficult to say, well, if the character of the area is now changed, can you refuse a single application where it's going to be similar to what's already there? I mean, this is a single application and no one else has this, so I would like to say that one extension would change the overall character of the area. But as I say, it's not something we really sort of encourage when there's actually policies there saying no 2-storey flat roofs on a existing house.
Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
With the refusal of permission recommended, the bit that concerns me is if a council building control inspector has advised the applicant to carry on building with a view to signing it off, what comments have you got on that side of it?
I did contact building control very recently. The actual officer who was on site has now left the authority, so I couldn't actually speak to him and to confirm exactly what had taken place, so I can't really say what happened. But I can imagine the building inspector was just discussing in terms of the building control regulations are different to planning. As I've mentioned in the presentation, there's a condition on the formal legal decision notice to say if you basically want to change your plans, you've got to go through and formally do that by amending the condition. But as I say, building control and the planning department are completely different kind of teams in different regulations. Normally what happens is if someone wants to change the building, the planning application, will go back to the planning department or officer who dealt with it, is to confirm that. I think the applicant's got a responsibility to try and make sure that the plans are in accordance with what they're going to build. So, I mean, I can't confirm exactly what was discussed on site, but I can completely...
I'm sorry, the discussion is between the members and the planner. The discussion, I'm sorry, the discussion is between the members and the planning department, and that is the process as is laid down. You've had your 5 minutes, and this is the process that needs to be followed. Thank you. This is the process that needs to be followed.
Well, tell the truth.
This is the process. If you continue, I'm going to have to ask you to leave.
I think that's all I had to say, to be honest. Yeah.
Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. Obviously, I was at the meeting we had in July, and it was my recollection that there was a deferral pending further discussion. So there's two questions I've got. One is it comes to the minutes on page 18, or sorry, the introduction, page 18, where it says that members deferred the application, further conversations. Can I just confirm, because this is very clear what's written here, no communication whatsoever from the applicant, even to say we're not going to change it, it is what it is, and bring it forward to November. I just want clarity on that, please.
There was a few emails sent just asking if they were going to send amended plans. I didn't receive any plans. There was the intention to try and remove the external staircase, to try and, I suppose, tidy it up a bit and remove that part of the refusal reason, which I still think there might be intention to do that, but as it stands, the plans are still exactly the same.
So from what I'm hearing, we have had communication, but not necessarily in terms of submitting alternative plans.
I mean, the communication was very brief, just...
Okay, right. Yeah. So that's clear, because that isn't necessarily what that says.
Yeah.
So the second question is this, and this we did touch on this back in July, and it relates to what we've discussed very briefly in terms of the building regulations team or person who no longer works for the council. So this is a bit messy. So it's he said, she said, I did, I didn't. So what I'm hearing is the applicant is doing stuff on the basis of what I would perceive or regard as good faith, as in this is what I'm being told to do, therefore I'm doing it. But it goes back to something I said in July. At what point does a building regulations person go out with plans for what should have been a single-storey building and not go, oh, hello, this is two-storey, maybe I should tell somebody? So it's a bit messy. So you'll understand, and I can't speak on behalf of other members here, but for me, there should be checks and balances all the way through our processes. And if somebody is of a professional standing who's working on behalf of this authority, who goes out and sees that something isn't what it is meant to be, why was that not reported? Was it reported but nobody did anything about it? Or is there no evidence trail? And maybe this is something to learn as we go forward, but what I'm hearing here is we built in good faith. We knew we went against it, but they said, nod and a wink, it'll be all right, mate. But actually, that's not the basis on which we should do planning in this authority. So I suppose the question, Chair, is what evidence is there that when we've been out to see this, that we put in a note of concern that it wasn't what was meant to have been built?
Chair, if I could answer that one. The Planning Department and Building Control, despite the fact that, as obviously the correlation of the fact we're both involved in development, they're very, very separate departments. They're as different as, I don't know, almost social services and education. It's you know, they don't really work. They don't work together. They're very separate. The building inspector would have had a plan that he was going out to inspect, whatever plan. Do you want me to keep going? I'll just keep going. Okay, I'll just continue. So the inspector I can't speak for them because I don't know what they do. I would imagine they've got a set of plans that they are working from, and they are looking at building regulations. They are looking at things like are the foundations in place, or certain measurements in place. They will work off the plan that the applicant has given them. And whatever plan the applicant has given the building inspector, I don't know. They might have discussed, the applicant might have discussed with the building inspector, how would we fare if we wanted to do this with it instead? And he may well have advised them on that. It's not up to the building inspector to then ask us, as the planning department, if those people have got planning permission for that. He may advise the applicant, you might want to check you've got the right permissions from planning in place with that. Whether he does or not, I don't think it's his job to do it. He might advise out of goodwill. It's up to the applicant to make sure they've got their planning permission in place and the building regulations in place. Now, what plans they show that building inspector is entirely up to them. If they differ from something, you know, that they've got on a planning permission, again, I wouldn't say the inspector is at liberty to tell them that they then need to seek further advice from the planning department. They may well do it off goodwill, but really the responsibility lies with the applicant.
Councillor Daly?
Chair, just as an action point from this, I appreciate what's been said. I think that something needs to be looked at because we do not know historically how many things like this have gone through because people haven't said what they should say. And maybe going forward, there's a little bit of a review about making every contact count, which is that if you're out there and it says it's 2-story or 1-story and it's a 3-story tower block, then you should probably have a mechanism. That's for a wider thing. I just wanted to make that point, Chair, but thank you for the answer on that one.
I think at the last meeting I did make a recommendation that there could be more discussion between the two departments, but I understand, excuse me, I understand building control is more the safety aspect of making sure that the foundations are done to a certain standard, that lintels are put in and they're the right size, they're the right strength, etc., etc. But I did make the recommendation at the last time. Councillor Scott, did I see you with your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions, if I may. Firstly, in just coming back to what Councillor Daly discussed, you know, obviously the allegation that we've heard from the applicant that they were told something by the building control inspector, that's not new. We heard this in July. Now, it was my understanding that that was going to be looked at, you know, properly between July and now, and, you know, perhaps a legal view taken on that, because that's a very serious allegation to make. And, you know, are we potentially leaving ourselves open to legal challenge, you know, depending on a decision that we take tonight? And secondly, and just coming back to what the planning officer was discussing, could I ask if the same officer is responsible for the planning department and the building control department?
Sorry, if you could just clarify, when you say the same officer?
I'm talking about the same directorate. So do they fall under the same directorate? So therefore they would have the same person at the top of the tree?
No, they don't. I don't exactly know who building control fall under. I think they are under, they sit with the fire department.
Would that be
I'm not
public
certain.
safety?
Yeah, like with public protection, they sit with those under, I know Phil Soderquist is the either head of service or director there, which is separate to this one.
Thank you. The reason I ask is just in my experience, certainly, you know, the experience I have of another authority that sit within the same part of the authority. I was just wanting to establish whether that was the case here or not. But that's seemingly not the case. Thank you.
No, I think they're separate, but I would have to double check.
Okay.
Paul, do you have another question?
Yeah, just this is a very straightforward rejection, except for one thing, that there seems to be an allegation that the building inspector misled them. That is what concerns me. It really concerns me, because as a civilian, nothing to do with council, I find it that, you know, they take the building inspector's word of mouth as the standard thing. So I am in a dilemma whether to support this. It's a serious dilemma because this is a serious breach of trust, in my opinion, from the council. Somebody just goes and then says, no problem, you can do that, and then people do that, then we come down with a ton of concrete. Sorry, this is the rule, you disobeyed. So it's an extremely difficult case for me, and I'm really, yeah, as Councillor Daly said, we need to look at the processes like some kind of a mechanism so that this does not occur again, Chair. We need to make sure. This is really tragic. Thank you.
Do we have any further questions for the planning officer? No? Okay. Do we have a proposal?
I propose that we should disregard the rejection on 2 grounds. The first, there is no case of precedence in theory. And second, it is, unless the allegation is proved otherwise, we have a responsibility to the way the people trust the building inspectors. I mean, so on those 2 grounds, I am very inclined to propose that we do not accept the planning regulations advice.
Okay. Do we have a seconder to that? Sorry.
Can you clarify that, please?
Yeah, just discussing with Melanie there.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you
To
please?
refuse the application, you would have to refuse it on planning considerations or for planning reasons. I mean, I think that, I understand what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, I think that's a separate investigation. But you have to, I think that that needs to be looked at separately, and you need to really form your view on whether this is acceptable in planning terms.
So what you are saying is that the proposal itself is not valid. Is that what you are saying, in the sense that it has to be looked at on its merit, and therefore what I propose on the grounds of precedence and other things cannot go forward? Is that what you are saying? If I understand correctly.
Can I just come in here, Chair? I think the point is that I think what you're saying is that you want to go against officer recommendation and approve this. Is that right?
That's correct.
Right. So what you need are planning reasons to do that. So, if you look at the 2 reasons for refusal in the report, you would, I should imagine, from what you're saying, not agree with those, in that you don't think that it would have any significant harm to the visual amenity of the area or on the outlook of the adjoining property. The fact that a building control officer may or may not have give them some advice in respect of a planning matter would not be any sort of material planning reason to approve this application. It has to be in planning terms.
Chair, I have no grounds to make that proposal, so I withdraw.
Okay, thank you. Based on the information provided there, do we have a proposal? Councillor Scott.
It's a very difficult situation, but I think in terms of what we've got in front of us, I suggest we move the officer recommendation and we refuse the application.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder to that motion? Malcolm? Okay. Do we have any other proposals? Okay. Do you want to debate the proposal? Councillor Robinson?
Like I said, it's a difficult one. I think it's pretty clear that the officer recommendation for refusal stands in planning terms. I think we tried our best in July to give them the time that we hoped they would need. It seems as if either it's not long enough or they haven't taken advantage of it for whatever reason. There's obviously a set of plans that haven't been followed for whatever reason. And that's the only thing we can consider. We can't consider allegations or this, that. I mean, I would have loved planning the building regs to be here tonight to cross-examine, but we can't do that. So with a heavy, heavy heart, I've got to second the motion.
I think as members, we're all regularly in a situation where we see objections to applications, not based on planning reasons. And I think this happens in many of our areas on numerous occasions where people raise objections, but they're not based on planning regulations or requirements. And they're very passionate about their objections. And I'm not saying they're not justified, but they need to be based on, on a planning basis. And that's where the difficulty arises. And I think in some cases there could be 100, 200 objections, but they're not planning based. And that's where things start to fall down. And that's where people get very disheartened about the process and the system and the council and the authority when things don't go their way, because it has to be a legitimate planning reason why objections are upheld. Do we have any other comments? Councillor O'Sullivan?
I have full support for the rejection by the planning officers. But my reluctance is that we are representatives of people, that's why it has come to us. And we need to look at the whole picture of what led things to come to this stage. And therefore, we should exercise a level of judgment that goes beyond what planning officers usually think about. So I urge my members to think carefully about how they deal with this proposal. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor?
I'm a little bit concerned, to be honest. Sorry about my voice. Go on. About the applicant. Obviously, they have invested quite a lot in this. The gentleman said he built it himself. They have relied heavily, obviously, on building control to come out. But for me, I would quite happily support the refusal and go with the officer, only because they knew what plans they were building and they've gone ahead and built something totally different. And that's what concerns me. And it concerned me in July, and the fact that we've given them the extension to go away and have a look and come back with something else and speak to planning about it to try and get a solution to it, and it hasn't been done. It just worries me that if we go ahead and grant it, it's a case of, oh, well, we can just do whatever we want, and it doesn't make any difference, because if we appeal and appeal and appeal, we'll just get through anyway. So I think, for me, I feel quite comfortable refusing this one and supporting the officers. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the question Councillor Daly asked before is with regards to the communication since July. The only communication was in response to the planning officer contacting them, and they said, yes, we'll be doing something, and then nothing was forthcoming. So that the applicant was given this deferment to discuss possibilities. Can we look at amending the design? What can we do, to minimise the impact? But was less than forthcoming. Seemed to rely more on the fact that there was no objections, but that's not a material planning point. So, do we have any further comments? Do you want to move to a vote. So the proposal is to agree with the planning officer's recommendation for refusal. All those in favour? Against? Okay, so that's up the numbers. Okay, thank you very much for that. I think we'll just pause the live stream for, sorry. It's for information only, agenda item 7. Hopefully you've all read through it. I'm pleased to say there doesn't seem to be much, if anything, covering our local area. Anyone have anything they wish to raise on there? Any questions? Well, you all feverishly flick through it, thinking, I should have read this before. Okay. Thank you. Right, just going to pause the live stream for a couple of minutes while the planners vacate. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and welcome back. We'll move on to item 8, which is public question time. Do we have any public questions, Heather?
No questions received, Chair.
Thank you very much. You're welcome. Item 9, petitions. So this is to receive any new petitions. Do we have any petitions to receive?
No new petitions.
Thank you. And part B of that is consider reports on petitions previously received. And we have a report on the petition for fly tipping in Seg Hill. And I'm going to pass over to John Robertson for this.
Good evening. I'm John Robertson. I'm the Principal Officer for the Environmental Enforcement Team and the Animal Welfare Team for Northumberland County Council. And this is a response to a petition for CCTV cameras on Mill Lane at Seg Hill. The petition submitted is requesting CCTV to be placed onto Mill Lane, Seg Hill, with a view to preventing further offences, particularly of fly tipping incidents. I don't know if you know the lane itself. It's about, well, it's more than 1.5 miles long, so it's quite a windy sort of location as well. And it would be extremely difficult with just one camera to cover the whole extent of the of Mill Lane itself. The length of the lane would probably require, I would suggest, certainly 4, but ideally 6 cameras, which is quite a considerable expense. And the reason that we would need that much is if we were successful and we were able to obtain some evidence, then obviously we'd have to have it of a sufficient nature that we could take a successful prosecution. This amount of equipment and resources required to maintain and supervise the deployment will incur quite an amount of additional costs for which there's no current budget to do so, unfortunately. The use and deployment of existing deployable cameras will also have a detrimental impact on the ability for the rest of the county itself. We've only got so many, and it would obviously reduce the impact on other areas that we need to cover, especially for antisocial behaviour, etc. We've asked Seaton Valley Council, and they can't assist either because they've got no budget for this activity. Part of my team, we deal with fly tipping throughout the county, and we do deploy covert cameras when it's proportionate to do so, and obviously that's because NCC are covered by the Regulatory Investigatory Powers Act, which means we've got to make sure that everything's done proportionally with regards to the authority gained. We have used cameras on Mill Lane. We used them last year. We successfully obtained evidence against 2 individuals who were subsequently given fixed penalty tickets for a fine of £400 each. This year we deployed a similar method. We were successful again, and we're currently awaiting a court date for a prosecution of an offender who, within the space of 1 week, fly tipped twice in the same area. And hopefully in the near future we'll be able to get his van forfeited and have him successfully convicted. A further option for consideration could be to have the actual lane itself target hardened. I believe historically the Mill Lane was the actual road between Seg Hill and Anetsford. However, since the 189 was built in the new road from Seg Hill to the bottom roundabout of Anetsford and Fordley, the lane itself has just become a bit of a shortcut or a rat run for locals, really, and for allotment users at one end. But obviously, because of the lack of traffic and the lack of use, it does tend to lend itself to an easy target for somebody who wants to fly tip somebody else's waste in the middle of nowhere. So we could consider target hardening. However, this would involve a traffic regulation order and the support of the local community to succeed. Unfortunately, that's not a quick option either. When I prepared the report in 2021, in Seguil, in total it had 49 reports of fly tipping incidents. The main area of concern is, both historically and recently, is Mill Lane. It's a single carriageway road which runs from the west side of the village for nearly a mile to the 189. Mill Lane itself, during this year, up until I made the report, had 19 fly tipping incidents. And the incidents are mainly of household or construction and demolition waste, which are brought to site by vehicles and dumped throughout the length of the lane. The normal way of reporting is for incidents to come through to either the neighbourhood waste teams or the environmental enforcement team. And between we investigate to see if there's anything within the waste itself that will identify the culprits, or if there's any information or intelligence to suggest who's actually doing it. And from that we progress the investigation to hopefully identify the person who's dumped it. Again, if a pattern develops where we think it's occurring more than it should be, then we can give consideration to the placement of covert cameras and recording equipment, which will hopefully catch the culprit. Like I said, NCC are most adhere to the REPA regulations of 2000, and that makes sure that the deployment's lawful and proportionate. Obviously takes into account the human rights of everybody who uses the lane, not just the offenders. Last year we used the cameras, like I said, successfully, and we're waiting for a prosecution. And hopefully when we'll get a successful outcome, I'll be able to publicise that, and we'll be able to hopefully further deter anybody else from being there. With regard to target hardening, it may well be a cheaper option. What we'd be looking at would probably to prevent vehicle access with a gate or barrier at each end of the lane, but allow enough space so that farmland, the horses that are kept in the fields near it, and pedestrians can still use the lane as they should be able to. But like I say, it's open at the minute, so it's obviously open to abuse from opportunist fly tippers. Finance-wise and value for money, any additional costs as a result of targeted hardening measures or restrictions to vehicle access along the section of the highway would need to be agreed with the relevant manager and local services and appropriate funding provision identified. There is currently no budget allowed for this type of activity. Legally, would have to look at it under the Highways Act of 1980. Would have to look at a traffic regulation order as well, which has obviously got to go to public. Go out in the public nature so they can have their objections, whatever, if they feel that that's not appropriate. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Questions, Councillor Scott?
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, John, for that report. Obviously, I'm the local member, as you know, and obviously, I speak to residents a lot about this particular issue. So, I can fully appreciate why it's difficult in terms of the request to fully cover that particular lane with CCTV. But obviously, as the report sets out, I was encouraged earlier this year you know, that was a covert operation taking place, and you know, there's a possible, you know, prosecution, you know, on the way for that. You know, so I would, you know, obviously I would encourage, you know, consideration of those cameras in the future, John, as you might expect me to say. I do believe also that you know, that there's a fixed camera in place there, or certainly in the vicinity of Mill Lane.
There is one there at the moment, but unfortunately where it is,
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate it. It's not straightforward. I think just talking about the other option in terms of like target hardening, I think that would need an awful lot of discussion, you know, with members of the public. I don't think there's a view there at the moment that lane, you know, should be, you know, not access to vehicles. I'll be perfectly frank on that. You know, so with that in mind, you know, as a local member, you know, I would ask, you know, just that it's very much, you know, continued to be a place of focus in terms of your operations, John. You know, residents in Seg Hill, you know, that there's a Seg Hill clean team now who are very active in the village in terms of litter picking, in terms of taking on, you know, initiatives to improve the village. So that there's a little bit of frustration there at the moment, but, you know, I fully appreciate that, you know, in terms of having 4 to 6 cameras there, that would be a challenge. Yeah. But what I would say, and I've made this offer to one of your colleagues, although Seaton Valley Parish might not have a budget to support, you know, measures, you know, possibly cameras being put in place somewhere else along the lane, you know, if it's permitted for me to use my, you know, small schemes budget to do that, I'd be more than willing to have a conversation with you and your team about that, John, just to support the efforts that are already taking place there on the lane.
Very much appreciated. I mean, in the, you know, in an ideal world, we would love to have CCTV camera along the length to prevent what's happening, but you know, unfortunately, it's a location that doesn't sort of lean to it being a successful venture. But yeah, while I'm sort of in charge of the enforcement team, if there's any sort of chance of catching anybody for fly tipping anywhere in the county, then we'll put cameras out, and that goes for the whole of the area. We have been successful. We have had cameras out, and hopefully, in the not too distant future, we'll have some success to share with the councillors for their areas. I think this week we'll certainly have a few at court, because the courts are starting to get busy again. And then in the not too distant future, we should have some success with regards to vehicles, like Sarah.
Thanks, John. And you know, as you've touched on there, you know, if that prosecution, you know, is successful, you know, I think that, you know, that, you know, as I'm sure will be the case, the first thing we need to be doing is speaking to the council's comms team to make sure that we get something out. Yeah. And you know, we can say in terms of Mill Lane and Steg Hill or anywhere else that there's a successful prosecution, that those really are no-go areas for fly tipping.
Well, if I get me way at court, we should hopefully have a vehicle to crush as well. So that will lend some good publicity, I hope.
Thanks, John.
Just to highlight as well, I know there's regularly, I think we all see on social media about stuff being dumped in various areas across the county, and you know, you see the comments, what are the council doing about it? A great deal, and working very, very hard to catch these people. It's just unfortunate that there's many doing it, you know, and there's lots of adverts you see, you know, like man with a van and all that, but it's not just them, it's individuals as well. Yeah. You know, and there's complaint about, oh, well, it costs to take to the tip. No, it doesn't. You know, I go to the tip regularly with household stuff, and you know, recycle it. It's the builder stuff. It's the garden stuff. You know, that does cost. And they're saying, well, scrap the cost. It costs the council to, you know, get rid of this waste. There are charges that well, it's not the council. It's the waste services. There are environmental charges that they have to pay themselves, which are quite significant. So it's not that they're trying to make a profit on it, it's because it costs us to get rid of it. But that doesn't excuse anyone for going up the back lane and dumping it here, there and everywhere, and every little back alley and roadway that they can. And rest assured, there is a great amount of work being done to catch these culprits, because we're trying to keep Northumberland as clean and tidy as we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's been difficult, obviously, because of the pandemic, etc. And courts have been closed for obvious reasons. But they are now back up and running, and I'm hoping sort of starting November, December, January, that we should have some decent results, or at least some decent convictions, so that we can start showing the public that we are actually out there doing what we're doing. You know.
Great, thank you very much.
Just briefly, Chair,
Yep.
just to add to what I said earlier, you know, obviously when these fly tipping incidents do occur, you know, they're very, very quickly reported by members of the public, or myself if I'm made aware of them. And, you know, I have to say that Tony that's sat on the end of the table there, his team does a fantastic job in terms of getting out there as quickly as possible. And, you know, residents do appreciate that. So, yes, they're very frustrated that these fly tipped incidents are occurring, and, you know, they would like to see people prosecuted, convicted, vehicles crushed, etc. But I think the work of Tony and Mark is absolutely fantastic, and that, you know, it's dealt with so quickly. So I do appreciate that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you. So, moving on. The next item, item 10, is for the youth service provision. Unfortunately, we're going to have to defer that to a later meeting because the people who were to present that at last minute are unavailable and we couldn't get any replacement. So we will have that item brought to a future meeting. Item 11, Northumberland Communities Together. I'm going to pass you over to Paul Brooks to go through that item.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everybody. For those who don't know me, my name's Paul Brooks. I'm the Head of Service for Northumberland Communities Together, and on behalf of Maureen Taylor, who's the Interim Executive Director for Business and Communities, and all the team at Northumberland Communities Together, I'd just like to thank you for the opportunity to come along and actually provide this update on Northumberland Communities Together. So Northumberland Communities Together, some of you may well have heard of, I'd like to think a lot of you have. The service was really born out of the early days of the pandemic and our statutory response to ensuring that Northumberland, we looked after our vulnerable residents and those clinically extremely vulnerable and those on the shielded patient list had their needs met whilst needing to isolate. So very much in the early days, it was a frantic need to pull a group of staff together who actually could make sure that those needs were addressed, that we could get emergency food provision out, we could make sure that prescriptions were getting out to those who needed it. But actually from the offset, the notion of Northumberland Communities Together was born out of that. We realised as a county we couldn't do as potentially other local authorities were doing around the country, that we needed the support of our communities across Northumberland, the army of community organisations, VCSE organisations and mutual aid groups that kind of sprouted up at the time. We really needed to work collectively with those to support us, to make sure that we could reach into those communities and support those people that needed it the most. So Northumberland's Community Together was kind of a recognition that we needed to really support in building that capability and capacity that existed across Northumberland, and support it at a time we need to come together so that we could build that community resilience and support individuals. So as a service, it's about connecting, strengthening and supporting adults and young people in local communities to improve their health life chances. But it's really about bringing together opportunities in communities, whether those be kind of physical activity opportunities or about making sure that people have access to services. It was Northumberland Communities Together is to help to bring all of those groups and organisations together to really help solve some of the challenges that exist within our communities. And by doing that, coming together, providing a resilience and a greater strength in our communities. Kind of, we've worked through that last 18 months. It seems like a whirlwind. It's been at huge pace for the service to deal with a number of challenges along the way. But the service itself now is a formal structure within the council. We've recognised that the opportunity that's afforded us to look at how as a council, we can work closer as a council to our communities, and how we can get our communities to work close to us with the council. So it is now a service, as I say, it sits under the executive directorship of Maureen Taylor. And as we go forward, it's about how we start to support those vulnerable people in our communities, and actually try and identify what that need is, and identify solutions out in local communities to stop people having to come into statutory services and those high costs of public service. So taking a very different approach about recognising the capability, the skills, the assets that lie in our communities, and using those to help us to resolve problems. Very much anchored in all we do in Northumberland Community Together is about tackling those wider determinants of health, those things that really do stop people from living their best life. So we're constantly, as a service, challenging what is it we are there for, how do we do that, and whether it's helping to address kind of hunger and food insecurities, or whether it's about making sure people have access to the right services and tackling some of those health inequalities that generally do exist in our communities, or about supporting people with social isolation. Kind of the service is working with partners, with VCSE organisations and others, to identify what are the needs in those communities. No two communities are the same, and how do we come together to provide innovative, creative solutions that help address those challenges in those communities and help tackle some of these wider determinants of health. So again, it's about working in partnership to co-develop and co-produce solutions for each of our communities. We haven't got the answer, but we've got a real key role to play as a local authority in supporting those communities and supporting those organisations to come together and work together to deliver on behalf of their residents. Kind of the structure on there is just to kind of, for ease, to try and explain how the service is constructed, if you like, and how we operate. It's much more of a Venn where, and much closely aligned across, but for ease, really, there's two parts of the service. On the left there in the green is the operational delivery, and on the right come our programme and projects delivery. The operational delivery are those kind of members of the team who are out in the communities. They take a very place-based approach. Our locality coordinators, they're out there mapping assets. So actually, who's operating in what part of the county? You know, what's their skills, capabilities? How big's the organisation? What volunteers do they have? You know, what are they providing to their communities? Whether it's a physical asset in a building, a community centre, or whether it's actually an individual. So really mapping that to identify who's it best placed to support residents with what type of solutions. We've got support planners who are out there kind of really on the day-to-day supporting residents to meet those needs. So identifying what it is that individuals are struggling with and helping to signpost those to the most appropriate support available in their community. That's helping them with advice and guidance around what benefits they may have, how they may, groups that are available to support them with potentially issues of social isolation or substance misuse. We've got welfare support advisors who are able to help people with financial hardship and make sure they follow the right pathway to get the support that they need, as well as providing immediate access and emergency relief in some cases. It is a multidisciplinary, multi-agency team. We've got staff from other parts of the organisation, from our agencies. We have staff on secondment through Police and Crime Commissioner and the Violence Reduction Unit working with us so that we can put targeted provision in some of our communities to deal with certain aspects. We also have a member of staff who's on secondment from the National Lottery, which is helping us to think about how we actually better use some of these grant funding, some of these opportunities for Northumberland to bring funds together and look at that, make sure that we're maximising the opportunities across all our communities to do something that's really going to be transformational and change and sustainable as we go forward. We have the COVID support officers who are jointly held, are hosted by ourselves, but supported and funded through support from Public Protection as well. So they're out and about supporting with the National Test and Trace system, so making door knocks, going out to those individuals who are self-isolating to make sure they're getting the practical support that they need to help them maintain social isolation, and also providing a wider role within the service supporting vulnerable residents and families. The other side is our kind of delivery side. As I mentioned in the early days, we had an emergency food distribution hub until the national system kind of caught pace, responsibility for distribution of PPE, and more lately kind of community lateral flow testing. We've got a number of projects on go, so we've been able to secure funding through North of Tyne, for the Community Hubs Investment Fund, and something we're really keen to push across Northumberland. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We've also got Holiday Activity and Food Programme, so DFE funding to provide holiday activity and food for those eligible children over the summer, Easter, Christmas holidays, so that they've got access to high quality activity, which is not just a sport based but cultural, creative arts and food to support them and sustain them through those non-term time periods is a vital offer of that. And we work with a partnership of food providers across Northumberland and activity providers to help us deliver that. Volunteer coordination, really keen that we build volunteering capacity across Northumberland. We've got COVID champions out there. We're looking at other opportunities for individuals to volunteer within their local communities and within some of these community hubs as they emerge as we go forward. We've recently undertaken a review of our VCS Commission and supporting our VCS infrastructure organisations so that they can work together to make sure that we've got a strong, vibrant voluntary community sector in Northumberland, and that they work together to make sure that we're providing the services that communities need. Along with that is a big programme of what we call Hub Programme Delivery, and Hub Programme Delivery is about connecting people and places, so some real enrichment activity that happens not only in the physical community spaces and the hubs, but actually out there in the green spaces, on the streets, to engage residents with the council, with some of those voluntary organisations, again, to just gather insights into what's going on, what support, what information do they need. That started off in the early days, really an opportunity for us. We knew where some of our vulnerable families were, some of our most deprived areas, and it was an opportunity to take some activity in a COVID safe and compliant way to get them to engage and kind of come across the threshold, so that we could make sure that they were safe, well, and that their needs were being met. It also allowed other partners such as schools, head teachers or other strategic partners to come along and engage with those communities, again, making sure those needs are met. They were well received and have kind of continued to develop and grow, and again are co-produced by communities in a place-based way to deliver what's needed in those communities. So kind of the referral into the hub is through a one number that we have for the hub. We're open 7 days a week, 9 till 6, and emergency out of hours is picked up as well. So kind of referrals come into the hub, and they are triaged to make sure that we kind of not only deal with what's presenting, but actually take a more holistic approach to why is this person being referred in, what's going on in their life, how can we help, and through that triage kind of identify the best possible pathway and solution for that individual. And this is where the strength of Communities Together is. It allows us to wrap that support round, involving practical support from other agencies, voluntary organisations, to support an individual who's actually reaching it at a time of need or in crisis to get the support that they want. So the operational team does that, picking up those referrals, doing that triage, and making sure we're responding as quickly and as most appropriately as we can to those calls. The community engagement and enrichment team, again, taking some of that local intelligence to find out what's going on in communities. Can we be a bit more proactive? If we're getting lots of referrals in, can we actually do something a bit more proactive? Can we go out into those communities, provide some information? Can we work with partners to actually take services out to those communities? Or, you know, is it just about providing more activities that help us address some of those wider determinant healths in those communities? I mentioned community hubs. We're fortunate. Obviously, Cramlington has our flagship community hub, which we're really proud of. you know, working with the town council and working with organisations and partners in Cramlington, it's been a huge success. And we do intend to roll more and more of these community hubs out around Northumberland. It's not about, you know, the council owning these and extending our portfolio, but actually identifying where community hubs already exist within communities. And they could be community centres, they could be church halls, but it's about working with those organisations and assets to understand the principle behind the community hubs, and being able to open those up to lots of partners to come together, to co-produce, to co-deliver, and actually meet the needs of residents. So quite an ongoing, and it'll be a long-term plan. It would be great if we had one everywhere. We haven't, but as I say, Cramlington is kind of allows us to showcase how, with libraries provision, extended provision, how we can start to open spaces to the community so that they can come and to do what it is that they want to do in support of their own residents. Within Cramlington, we are fortunate. We've put a teaching and learning cafe in there again, so you know, we're not in competition with the commercial kind of retailers in there, but it's about a safe space to offer opportunities to people who may not necessarily have been able to engage or appropriate to engage with mainstream education, to provide them an opportunity to enter into the world of catering, hospitality, and develop skills whilst actually complementing the offer of a community hub facility. And the progress and development of those learners has been really quite inspiring to see. So kind of snapshot of progress, as I say, we kind of started in the early days. It was about that statutory response and, you know, 25,515 clinically extremely vulnerable people in the early days needed to be supported, and it was about practically making contact with those individuals to make sure they're safe and well. It involved a lot of kind of individual welfare visits to people to make sure they're all right, the coordination distribution of emergency food and other things such as PPE, as it says on there, as we go forward. We've also taken responsibility for the administration of a number of grant fundings that's come in through the local authority through Section 31 of the Local Government Acts, so such as DWP funding for the COVID Winter Support Grant, the local support grant, and more recently the household support fund. So we've been the route to provide that out to make sure individuals in need of support can get that assistance, and that's been through kind of the opportunity for direct referrals in by individuals and by trusted partners and professionals, so working with colleagues across the council and directorates, other statutory partners and VCSE organisations and town councillors, so to make sure that those people who are in need are referred through to get the support they want, as well as working with some of our bigger trusted partners and providing through third-party organisations opportunity to passport some of that funding through there so they can get that support out onto the ground to the people in need in the most quickest and easiest possible route. So again, a collective approach to making sure we're able to get that money to where it is needed. So quite a significant amount that's come through that. And as I mentioned, community enrichment, not just kind of sitting back and keeping ourselves locked away in isolation, but actually in that time, it's certainly an important time of lockdown, getting out there into the communities to make sure that we were visible and that we were demonstrating the commitment by the local authority and other partners that there was a genuine offer of support there for individuals that they could connect in with, raise any concerns and hopefully get those needs met. That included the delivery, as I say, of the non-term time holiday and food provision. We've been really fortunate in Northumberland because of the approach we've taken, and by working in partnership with other statutory partners and with the VCSA, we've been able to collectively pool our resources, and we've been able to do a lot more. And I'm really proud of that approach we've taken in Northumberland. We haven't just done what was the minimum ask, but for instance, over the half-term period, we've continued to provide holiday activity and food provision. We've provided universal offers to families so that they could have an enriched opportunity to take the children out for the day and get food. So we've tried to do as much as we can with the provision that we've got, and we've done that by being creative and working in partnership. Have I got time, Chair? Just quickly, I thought to bring this to life, I just two little case studies. The first one is of Bethany's story. Bethany's not the real name, we've changed that. But this is a real incident that happened in Cramlington, and I thought it would just give you an idea of what the team deal with on a daily basis. So Bethany was a care leaver, thankfully not one of ours, it was from another local authority, but on the way to work one morning, a member of the team kind of noticed the young lady who was sat on a park bench, looked distressed, had obviously been there overnight, was cold, looked a bit ragged, so kind of approached them just to make sure she was all right, and if there was anything she could do. The young lady, Bethany, disclosed that she'd recently kind of broken up in a relationship, and that she'd been sleeping rough because she'd just recently secured a job and didn't want to lose it, but had nowhere else to go. So invite her into the hub, kind of opportunity to just freshen up. We gave her some breakfast, cup of tea, something to eat. And then one of the team walked along with her to her employer with the consent of Bethany, just to disclose the fact that she'd found herself in this situation. She was waiting for emergency accommodation, and that she just if they could keep an eye out on her. Bethany had presented with a black eye, so there was a concern from the team that potentially it was domestic. There had been a relationship breakdown, so we just wanted to make sure she was safe. While she was at work, the team kind of set about expediting some emergency accommodation for Bethany, and got the keys to that accommodation brought forward so we could house her. Working with voluntary VCS organisations and partners, we were able to secure some white goods and brown goods to go into that property to make sure she had what she needed in order to kind of have a settled accommodation. We used some of the grant money to buy some food and make sure she had the essentials she's needed, so that when she got home from work, the home was there. She was taken by a member of the team and some volunteers from a local VCS to settle her in her home. As I say, she was out of area. She had been a looked after child in another local authority. Her network was somewhere else, so we kind of funded a mobile phone just so that she could use that to get some of her own affairs in order, but also to make sure that she had connection to that network that was out of county. All of that was very little expense to us whatsoever from and just a normal day in the life of the hub and the people that work in there. Now, had a member of staff not intervened, had we not had the support of those VCSE organisations to put those things in place and get Bethany settled, no doubt that, she would have ultimately probably ended up back home, potentially back into a care system, or, potentially even worse, greater level of vulnerability, open to exploitation on the streets and homelessness and everything. But either way could have led to huge kind of public costs to keep Bethany safe and well. So with a little bit of community support and spirit and cooperation, we were able to set her. Bethany now probably drops in every day on her way to work to see the team, and has actually requested that she volunteers in the hub in a genuine kind of wanting to give back to that community. So that was Bethany's. Katie, again, referral in from a counsellor. Katie had a ongoing health issue, so much so she was unable to upkeep her accommodation. The garden, which is the picture to the top right there, had overgrown. It had become a focus for some fly tipping and littering within that, which caused community discord. There was environmental concerns because of the rubbish that was in there. So much so this led to the point that Katie was about to be evicted from her residence whilst going into hospital for a fairly major treatment. So kind of got involved with the community, mobilised a group of volunteers to go and actually deal with the garden and cut that back and deal with the rubbish. Support went in to make sure that Katie had everything she needed post-op, so that she could return to her home and stabilise herself within her own property. The community got to know a bit more. Katie hadn't really engaged with the community. She was quiet. She was a bit of a recluse. The community knew more about Katie and her life story, and were kind of more compassionate to that. So they started to lend support and make sure that she'd being visited, and were supporting her with food on her post-op. But generally, the community saw what had been achieved in there. The group that came together to deal with the garden have set up a little kind of enterprise and are now offering that service to other residents to help them, as generally the more older population are unable to maintain their gardens. A little community spirit is emerging. And so again, through very little, if not hardly any financial support, the team were able to mobilise VCSC support to actually address the needs of our residents. What's coming next for us, as I mentioned about kind of pop-up sessions, we've all heard about the kind of the fuel increase in fuel prices, obviously the cessation of UC credit uplift and furlough things. So we know that potentially the winter may be difficult for some of our residents. So we're doing a series of pop-ups as these enrichments to go out there into our communities to let people know what support is available for them over the winter period. To look at household support funds should they need support with food, fuel or utilities over that period. Are they accessing grants, cold winter grants, things like that? Potentially, is there opportunity to access some of the warm home discounts, or even some of the grants now about improving the efficiency of the home through the green home grants? So proactively out and about in our communities, supporting them. And again, this includes community centres, schools, and just some pop-ups within streets to raise awareness of the support that's on, so that potentially none of our residents go without that support over the winter period. As I say, single number into Northumberland Communities Together, 01670 620 015, 9 to 6, 7 days a week, or an email number at nct@northumberland.gov.uk. On the left is the Locality Coordinator. So as I say, we take a place-based approach. That's the names and details of each of the Locality Coordinators, and some of you may be aware of Michelle Redfern, who supports your localities as a Locality Coordinator, helping to build that knowledge of assets out and about in the community. A very quick run, but thank you very much for your time. Any questions?
Thank you, Paul. All I can say is, wow, such an expanding, far-reaching and essential service, which has come so far from in such a short time. And you mentioned in there, about how proud you are, and you should be, given what's been achieved in, I'm going to say, a relatively short space of time. Because it was only last year, with the start of COVID, etc. And what's been achieved and the results so far, and where you are going, and with all the residents, the work that you're doing with all them, and what's available, it's quite amazing. So I just wanted to get that in first before I say, any questions. Councillor Daly.
Echo what you've just said, Chair. Going back, this has been done remarkably quickly, born out of COVID, but actually something which was needed because of generational inequalities which sit within our communities. And some of this stuff was happening anyway, but it was never really joined up, and there was never really that structure to it. So this is what has happened as a result. And I'm glad you've given Cramlington a name check. That's very good. Very happy about that one. But if you really want to understand what impact this has had, so going back to, I think it was June 2020 when I was on North of Tyne Cabinet, when I got the money through for Northumberland to make these hubs happen, there was an empty building in Cramlington, which had been empty for years. It was a relatively new building sitting between Concordia and a former bingo hall. And that building is now brought to life. It is now vibrant. It is used extensively by our communities. It's the home of a new library. It is the home of the Cramlington the hub at Cramlington. And it's become the centre point to stimulate activity in the town. So it's not just about a building, it's a place, asset-based approach. So it's not just what happens physically in that building, which is incredible, it's what happens out in our wider communities. So, you know, Paul, you've touched on so many things tonight, which I'd actually written down some things and I thought I would cross them off. He's ticked them. But I just wanted to touch on a couple of things from my own experience about why this is such a good model and why this really should be rolling out around our towns in the county. So number one, the staff make the difference. When you walk in there, it is welcoming, with a smile, with a meet and greet, with a navigator who can tell you and passport you through whatever you need. And if you don't want to talk to anybody, you don't have to talk to anybody, which is great. So that's really good. That community cafe, that coffee cart, is brilliant because that is giving real tangible work skills to some individuals who probably would not have had that opportunity, and hopefully that will transition them into mainstream employment, which is fantastic. I think the other thing which I just want to pick up on is I had a meeting there a couple of weeks ago on a work-related reason why. And when I was there were a group of young lads who were probably about 13, 14, 15, sitting around tables. This is in the afternoon. And just sort of said hello to them, and they were very friendly and stuff. And then I got told a few little stories. Initially, what they were doing was standing outside, looking through the windows, gawping in. Then they were encouraged in, free hot chocolate, engagement with staff, and now they're regulars. They come in, they're engaging, they're finding out about what's happening in their town. So this hub is doing like loads of stuff. It's doing youth work, it's linking into all of the sections within the council and wider afield. So I think there are some really good case studies, and I know you've touched on them there, but I think there are some really good case studies within the hub model, which we should be promoting nationally, regionally and nationally, because this clearly, I think, is the way forward. And if anybody hasn't been to the site in Cramlington, please come along. It's in the Manor Walks, Asda area, big white building, can't miss it. Go in, you will be welcomed with open arms. And the fact is that it is, I think, making a difference to our town. And I'm delighted also that as a town council, Cramlington Town Council, has invested in a youth and community team who are working very closely with the county council. And I think there's some really good models for every single part of our county here to learn from. Not everyone is going to want this model because it might not work in some of our communities. But what we have is a template here to go forward. And all I can do is please, from tonight, go out and thank the staff, and you yourself as well, for the incredible amount of work which has gone in, not just to this physical site in Cramlington, but to that whole communities together model, which, as I say, was born out of COVID and now has sustainability and will hopefully go a long way to repairing some of the generational inequalities which sit within our county, and that can only be a good thing. So thank you for that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Wayne. Anybody else? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going into a glossy travellogue for Cromlin. I'm going to ask a question, which was what was supposed to happen. The holiday activities, are these holiday activities open to all, or are they just a specific target audience?
So they're targeted. So the DFE has provided funding. So it's just try and move away families on free school meal entitlement, away from kind of grab bags and vouchers, to actually some sustainable kind of some engaging activity in that. So there is targeted provision for those who are eligible for free school meals. So that and that's our target priority to make sure we engage and target those families, because we know that there's potentially support is needed. But we do also look at wider universal offer. So again, how can we make sure that we open that to those who want to engage with it. Now, obviously, we're not replicating a free kind of holiday kind of childcare, but, you know, we recognise that, you know, the level of need isn't necessarily based on whether you get 3 school meal entitlement or not. So through the holiday and food programme, it is targeted for that. But actually, this is again about how we're looking at using some of our other funds and some of our other funding and opportunities and partners to look at how we make a wider universal offer that is open to those who want to and might need to engage with that type of provision. So it is targeted, and you know, DFE would want me to say that, but we are looking at making sure that we try and enhance and extend that much further beyond those parameters to try and reach as many people in as we can who need that support.
I'm happy to hear that, because I went and looked at what you were delivering in my ward with the help of a local organisation, and I'm acutely aware that, you know, some of our young people need help that don't necessarily have free school meals, and it's more behavioural help, and giving them something to do, just as simple as that, probably helps them out of the boredom that they're experiencing, and that boredom probably ends up in a lot of cases in antisocial behaviour, certainly in my ward. So thank you.
And here was me thinking you were just trying to get something to do for yourself there, Martin. Councillor Sheldon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to echo what Mark and Councillor Daly said, but mine is more a suggestion than a question. There are lots of food banks within Cramlington, like there are 2, you know, Hope Centre and everything. Do you have connections with such food banks and etc.? So.
Yeah, so kind of food banks are a key partner of ours, and they've supported. You know, they've been a great asset throughout this. We've one of the pathways I talked about Park Communities Together was bringing kind of like-minded groups together. So we have a food partnership in across Northumberland. So the food banks and anybody interested in food partnerships have come together, and that's really, again, a collective and concerted effort to how do we deal with food poverty and food insecurity in a different way. How do we make sure that we can use food surplus? How can we direct that so it supports? So, for instance, our food banks and some of that food surplus is being used to deliver the holiday activity and food programs, because some of those activity providers, you know, you might be a local football club who, you know, you don't necessarily deal with that food, so someone else can step in and provide that provision. So if we come together and everybody play their part, we can make sure that the offer is as diverse and vibrant, and it's of high quality because everybody's playing their part. So yeah, food banks are connected in and can be connected into a much bigger pathway and strategic approach to look at how we're trying to deal with food poverty and food insecurity and disadvantage across Northumberland. And again, that's not us saying what we think should do it, but actually kind of bringing those individuals together to allow them to set the scene and the strategy and what it is that we need to do together to move Northumberland forward, and to be quite honest, to make sure that we eradicate the need for food banks in the future. What would that system look like? And I'm not saying there isn't a place for food bank, but actually, how can we make sure that we really start to make a difference?
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, thank you. I wasn't aware of a lot of the stuff that you've been doing. I mean, I think I knew it was going on, but I didn't have a lot of the understanding. I'm definitely going to go to Cramlington, although I would like to talk about Bedlington, very close to my heart. And I would like to extend an invitation. At West Bedlington Town Council, they're looking at youth working group, and I think it would be really, really beneficial, maybe for both lots, to get together to see what you can do for us, maybe what we can do for you. Cramlington are doing something. Maybe we could look at what they're doing. I'm not saying we'll replicate it. We haven't got the money that they've got, but we have got a nice budget, and we'll want to do something for the kids in our town, because we're getting a bit of antisocial behaviour. we want to do something more all-inclusive for the kids, not just focus on children that are maybe more underprivileged, but obviously we want to make sure they're included, but just look at the kids in the round. And obviously maybe we can look at Malcolm's ward as well, because we're sort of like stretched across. So anytime you're free.
No, absolutely. I think, you know, and that's the beauty of having our locality coordinators, to start to connect that and bring other people in, so that, you know, that no one organisation is doing it in isolation trying to solve the problem, but actually who's out there who might be able to do that. Youth provision is that, you know, there is a need to look at at youth strategy. I know we potentially with the youth service, but I think nationally there's some movement in that way around youth strategy and potentially some support. And again, having a member, having Steph Ellis, who's on to come from National Lottery, allows us to tie into some of that kind of the bigger, wider thinking nationally, and about some of the opportunities that may come down the road, and how do we make sure Northumberland connects in with that. But certainly from a place-based point, locality coordinators, we can have that discussion and look at who's in there and how can we kind of make sure that there's appropriate provision for the town.
Anybody else? Okay, can I just thank you for coming along, Paul? I really wanted to get this in before Christmas, because obviously leading up to the festive period, it can get very difficult for people. And I wanted to make sure we have this presentation beforehand. Also, thank you. I'm not sure there are other members. I received yesterday an envelope with leaflets and cards in, with a lot of contact details on there and a lot of information, which I'm sure will be, you know, very helpful, that we can pass on that information. So thank you again for coming. Thank you for the presentation. It has been really, really helpful and informative. Okay, thanks. We'll move on to item 12, which is winter services, preparedness and resilience, and that's Mick Cole.
So, Chair, I thought that was an information, and I'll take any questions that you'd like to give us on that. Oh, I'm more than happy to answer
Your name was in the frame. Does anyone have any questions with regards to winter facilities? Councillor Daly.
Don't say it like that. It's a question. Right. For the next 10 minutes, here we go. Right. It's just in terms of winter preparation with salt. Do we have to import any of the salt, and is there any backlog because of COVID or whatever in delivery of salt into Northumberland?
And where we're at the moment is we place our order quite early in the summer. We get deliveries in the summer. There was a very large ship came into the port of Blythe. The salt comes from Spain, the flats in Spain. We're part of the NEPO framework, and we, because of us being in earlier, quite ahead of everyone else, we've got a strategic store in Powburn, which came back off the report that was done back in 2010, the Cornby report. We've got a strategic store of 5,000 tonnes, and that's busy getting topped up now, and that'll be the last of it. So all our frontline salt's in place, stocked up and ready to go.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Lee?
Just a quick one regarding grip bins. At Lanarkhouse Park, there's no provision for a grip bin, and that leads through to Beach Avenue as well. Lanarkhouse Park does have a sharp bend on it, and Rowan Grove, which leads up to Beach Avenue, that has no grip bin either. Is there a chance one of those could be put in place ahead of the winter?
What we tend to do is we have a policy and a scoring mechanism on all the grip bins, because at the minute we've got 1,600 grip bins across the county. That's about 400 tonnes of salt sitting out on the network. So we score it based on location, nearness to an existing gritting route, and other different criteria. And what I'll do is I'll get the inspector to go and make an assessment of that, and then come back to you whether it's reached the criteria or not.
Thank you. It's just across from the hospital there, but the residents have been requesting it for a few months now, and we have provision elsewhere in Cramlington East with grip bins, just not that particular estate. It's been left out.
there's a lot of bins within the Cramlington area that probably don't hit criteria, but they've been funded by the town council. That's always one other avenue where you can go down to do that.
I'll stick with the county council option on that one.
That works for me.
Councillor Isles,
Just a very quick question. So I understand grit bins in page 44. You talk about grit heaps. I have noticed in the past, Alexandra Park, there used to be a heap of grit when the winter is heavy, when the conditions are bad. Are there any other spots in Cramlington? I mean, it's difficult to know where exactly the grit heaps are there, whether I am just assuming, because I have seen heaps in Alexandra Park, so I'm assuming it's a spot for grit heaps. So is there a list of places where residents can find grit heaps?
Grit heaps tend to be predominantly in the more rural areas, on sort of on inclines and things where you would expect steep inclines and bends, etc.
Right.
And they're sort of put there at the beginning of the seasons. We don't often put grit heaps within areas like that. We'd rather retain it within a grit bin if it's in a suitable location, and maintain it that way, because it degrades quite quickly when it's left out in the open. Because it's obviously soluble as much as anything else.
Yeah, but last winter I saw a grit heap. That's heap of grit left in the Alexandra car park, just like no bin, nothing. So it was very useful. In fact, many residents helped themselves. So
I think what you're describing is something probably larger than what I'm describing. I'm describing something that's probably about 1 metre cubed by the side of the road.
Oh, I see.
I think you're talking. I wasn't aware of that being there.
It was just a heap.
Yeah,
sitting there, very small, not 1 meter, definitely.
We tend to keep the stores, our salt storage is all covered. We retain it within local authority depots, etc., to protect it, because otherwise they just go very, very quickly.
Yeah. Okay. So that just happened accidentally.
Potentially, yeah. I'll need to look into that though.
Right. Okay. But it was helpful though. It was helpful at that time.
At that time,
At that time, yes, because many residents went and helped, including myself. Thank you.
Councillor, it may well have been my team, based from Alex Park. They'll have grabbed some, grabbed with permission, of course, from my colleague to my right, some salt to have it strategically located in Cramlington to use in the various areas.
Tony, if that is your team as work, it is really highly commended. Please do it again. But if the winter gets worse, because there are lots of people who came and helped themselves and then put it on the pathway, so it was really useful. Because Alexandra Park is also the center of several wards, actually. So it was good. Good. Thank you.
And as if by magic, local services used, Tony Gribbin.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick update, and then obviously I'll take Councillor Daly's questions. Again, staff in all sections have continued to deliver the high-profile services, despite the continued challenges that we've continued to face with COVID and their working practices and continued self-isolation in those conditions. Bereavement services, thankfully, cremation numbers and burial service numbers have reduced to around what we would expect around this time of year, so particularly grateful for that. Grass cutting has now ended, and we've sort of come through those challenging periods throughout the year with very wet and then very warm, hot weather. Street sweeping, we're continuing to working through normal areas, but have moved on to leaf hotspots, and can I just thank members who have assisted in identifying accumulations. I'm sure your residents have helped you identify where there are some accumulations. I would think in the next couple of weeks, hopefully the rest of the leaves that are currently sitting on trees will have come off, and we can gather them up and move them on and move on to other works. Winter works, they've all now commenced, and that's the winter horticultural works of the shrub maintenance, path edging and hedges, and that'll continue into March 22. Waste services, residual, recycling and garden waste collection services have all operated well. garden waste collection services are coming to an end for the winter season. And we're currently reviewing, as I said last time, still ongoing that review, the collection rounds and resources in the southeast, but also across the county, just regarding housing developments, which seem predominantly to be in the southeast, but there are some across the rest of the county, but also the increased tonnages that we've experienced because of lockdown. They just went up and haven't quite got back to what we'd had previously. One thing on the refuse collection, and I believe that members will be made aware formally that there's be, just as we hurtle towards Christmas, there'll be a change in collection days. So if you start getting any inquiries, you will be getting some information regarding the day changes. I think the fundamental one is those collections that would take place on Monday the 27th will be taking place on Friday the 24th. So that'll be ahead of usual collections. The other ones after that will be after a day late, which is the conventional way. And it's really to try and avoid disrupting customers' collections and delaying collections over that very busy period as least as possible. And leading up to what will be a more normal Christmas, I think, than we've experienced for a couple of years, we'll be looking to empty bottle banks across the LAC area ahead of those the parties that may take place and the increased usage that they may receive. So that should be in place leading up to the Christmas period. And one final thing, the local, the public conveniences, they'll remain open with the exception of Christmas Day and New Year's Day, and we'll maintain the three cleansing operations during the course. And in the southeast, it's in Seaton Valley really. We're looking to perhaps take an opportunity to refurbish or just repaint and just try and make them, spruce them up a little bit. So there may be some disruption. We've had some, we're going to try and maybe put a harder wearing paint in so we can wash them down a little bit more often. And we've had some suggestions of colours of maybe a more pastel colour, like a duck egg blue or something. But I think we're going to stay with white, and that should just allow the cleaning operation to take place and then have a look at a nice fresh facility. And that's my whistle-stop review of local services. Chair, councillors.
Thank you, Tony. I mean, fancy binmen having Christmas Day and Boxing Day off. Whatever will happen next. Any questions? Councillor Daly.
First, what are you all laughing for? Right, so first of all, thank you, Tony, because you went out for a ward walk with me, which I know is an offer you put out to all members. This brings me on to my second point, which is around what I've raised before, about where are we in terms of looking at the service delivery and modifications due to climate change, because as you're aware, in my area, the bushes are growing much longer and much faster than they have previously. So how is that being reflected in terms of changing working patterns or even plans that you've got to modify working patterns to take into account climate change?
And one thing that we did following our walkabout is we're going to take where we can a slightly harder approach with some of the shrubs and hedges, so that when we do get growth, it doesn't then encroach on footpaths, which is one of the things that you identified sort of mid-grass cutting season, and it wasn't really the season where we would be going to do anything. So we're going to take a slightly harder look to move it back a little bit further. From an operational point of view, that's how we're going to try and deal with that aspect.
Okay. Councillor Scott.
Thanks, Chair. Tony, you mentioned that grass cutting had come to an end. I just wanted to check if those particular areas that I speak to you about every few days have been cut yet.
They haven't, but I spoke with the contractor yesterday, and he's going to assess what he needs to do, whether to mulch it completely so he won't need to collect it, or cut it and then remove it. So it's not forgotten about, I promise you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Tony.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of questions. I won't ask about anything we spoke about before, but there is one in particular, and that's the wonky roundabout and the state of it, because I continue to get residents onto me, and motorists actually, because they can't see it all because of the damn weeds in the middle. And I suggested to you that we'll maybe come up with a little scheme on it to get rid of those weeds.
I'm sure we can do something. I'm going to...
You were going to see who was responsible for the maintenance.
And I think it's the developer. I'm not sure it's called the wonky roundabout in the highways parlance, but I know exactly where Councillor Robinson means.
It's, I think it is the developer. They were supposed to plant it with suitable things to begin with, and never did. It's just full of weeds now, and they're about 3-4 foot high. And they're still there, so you can't see cars coming in.
But from a safety point of view, Councillor, we'll be able to do something.
Right, we'll get together and we'll do something on that.
Yeah.
The other thing, quick question. The weeds, when we had a look in our water round, you mentioned that you're going to get a new machine, but I haven't seen any evidence of it.
No, you haven't yet. It broke down, so we're it's just waiting to get repaired, and it is coming. I promise you, it is coming in your area.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Shelburne.
It's a peripheral question, Mr. Cribben. You may say, I don't know. I was told our council is running some pilot projects on collecting bottles, coming to the houses and collecting bottles. Where exactly the pilot projects are running? Is there anything in our LAC? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Yeah, there is, and it's in West Bedlington at the moment. There was a series of pilot areas across the county, and the area that was chosen was in West Bedlington. There's about 1,100 houses. I think that's going to be escalated to 1,300, and the trial's been extended for I believe another 12 months. And the reason for that, I was just it's a bit like Blue Peter's. I have one here prepared. It's the council are trying to. It's been very successful, the trial, and they've got a lot of data back, but they want to ensure that the data they've got back isn't artificially increased because of COVID conditions and lockdown and people being at home. But the other thing is that when the Environment Bill is completed and goes through Parliament, it's understood, or it's sort of we believe that there will be funding made available from central government from I'm just trying to find it. I think it's a burden funding process whereby central government would fund the costs to implement that, rather than Northumberland having to find those costs and it being a direct impact on the residents. So I think we're holding off until that's gone through, so that central government effectively fund the rollout across the county, if that's what happens after the trial period.
Thank you. Just one more question on what you said to Daly, Councillor Daly, like cutting the bushes very closely so that it doesn't block anything. So is there any, do you have any program or schedule on that one? Or you said 22nd of March or something like that. Are you saying it will be finished before that?
There's an incremental, well, it's a 22-week winter maintenance period that the team work through. So we've got between now and the March 22, which is when we start gearing up for the grass cutting season. And again, that'll depend on weather conditions, what we faced through the winter. That Mix and his colleagues will deal with from a snow and ice point of view, and we'll support him as best we can in the local areas. But I did get your email regarding, can I give you an update, and I will come back to you. I had a meeting this morning, and I want to confirm exactly what we can do before I send it to you, but you'll have it confirmed by the end of the week.
Thank you very much for all the details. In fact, on the first question, you gave me more than I expected. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a few questions now. Sorry. Oh, beg your pardon, Councillor Taylor. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I'll be really quick. Thank you, Chair. Tony had requested a bottle bin for the community centre in West Bedlington, a giant one if we can get one, but there's nothing appeared as of yet. I don't know if my request has got through to yourself, but I did it properly through the proper channels. So I'm just wondering if you could help, if you can chivvy it on,
Did you mean one of the like a bottle bank skips?
Yeah.
That you see in the lodge, right? In where did you want it, councillor? In the community centre.
And yes, for West Bedlington Community Centre.
Right. Okay.
Because they're in the area that's taking part in the trial.
Oh, I see. Right. It's just a small container you're looking for, because I'm not sure what we would provide.
You know the bins with the purple tops that we've all got.
Yes.
I need something bigger than that.
Okay. Right. I haven't had a request
Right,
come into me, so I'm not sure where it would have gone into.
Well, I put it in through the main reception, but that was a couple of weeks ago, and I know how efficient you are, and I know I would have got a response before now had you received it.
You'll not get it quicker because of that, Chris.
I will. He's very efficient.
Thanks, councillor.
Very. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Tony, so you mentioned before about the leaf clearance in the normal areas. I've seen the wagon going around like the main streets around the town centre. When you say normal areas, I'm wondering when the wagon will be going into like the estates, and maybe doing cycleways and stuff like that.
Do you mean the large mechanical sweeping machine? Yeah, he hasn't done the estates yet because we were doing the main routes in, but we will have him going into the estates in the next week or so. The vehicle that we have to share with other areas, we don't have a dedicated large mechanical push just for Cramlington. And to be perfectly honest, councillor, we have to get a driver from another area because he needs a heavy goods licence to drive it. So it's when he's available, and it's usually either on a Friday afternoon or weekends when he can come into the Cramlington area.
What happens as well with regard, I'm going to give you an example here, Station Road. So, you know, beside like Manor Walks, and Councillor Daly got on to me about this one because he drove down there and rang me up straight away. So the wagon goes down Station Road and clears the gullies out and all the leaves, but they're piled that high on the footpath that within an hour they've blown back into the road. So how do we tackle this?
It's a challenge, councillor. We don't have as many staff now as we used to have when the partnership was in place with Cramlington Town Council. So we don't have the resources, and we've got to target those resources that we do have as strategically as we can. We're looking at mechanical devices, sort of huge leaf sucking machines that will draw high volumes of leaves up quickly, and we'd hope to get one in as quickly as we can. Or we have to strategically blow them into areas with the manual backpacks, and then either use the small mechanical sweeping machines or the large ones, which is what we did in Bedlington on Saturday morning, just outside of Westley Cemetery. We had somebody turn up, brush them all into the road, took off the footpath ahead of the remembrance services, and swept them up, which was far more efficient than having a team with a little caged vehicle doing so. But we're acutely aware of that. You know, there is a challenge when we have autumn fall, and then the temperature drops and all the leaves fall off the trees.
Okay, moving on. When we have the the walkabout on like my ward, there was a few things that were pointed out. So the little islands, you know, the triangles off the roundabouts in the middle, you know, pointed out all the weeds there. Said we're looking at doing some treatment, but there's nothing happened yet. We've still got all those issues with every one of those, still weeds all over the place. The overgrown weeds in the burn at Barnes Park, and also the footbridge, which has got the problems with the rotten wood on there. And I'm just wondering when we're going to be addressing those areas. I mean, the report, the original report for that footbridge, was put in earlier on this year, and I'm still getting residents complaining, and also about obviously the burn as well, but residents complaining about that footbridge as to say, when is this going to get done?
With regards to the weeds on the island, we're going to use the new mechanical weed ripping machine to go on there, but we're very conscious of how poor the surface is, and we don't want to cause too much damage from a tarmac point of view. And there's Mick's going to come and help me resurface them. Excellent. So we are going to address that. The burn weeds, and also at North Burn, I'm hoping to have a meeting with the Environment Agency regarding that, because it's a, I don't think it's a grey area, but it seems to be a bit of a grey area, and Councillor Daly is aware of this as well, regarding riparian land ownership and who's responsible for that waterway, and then the immediate land next to it, which is the riparian owner. So I've met with one of the flood defence officers on site, both at where you and I met and where Councillor Daly and I met, and I emailed her today to say where we are at with the meeting with the EA. So I haven't got an answer for you, Councillor, because I'm still waiting to get some information from the Environment Agency myself. Once I do, I'll share that with you and Councillor Daly, because it'll be very interesting to see exactly how we move that forward. And the footbridge, I think the footbridge, I have forwarded it to colleagues in the countryside team, and I'll chase that up with them. But I think there's an issue regarding it's not registered to anybody, that land. The bridge isn't registered to anybody, so it doesn't seem to be anybody's responsibility to repair. But I'll chase it up in the morning when I get back.
You know, if you could, I mean, the thing's rotten and it's not safe. And if it comes to it, you know, have I got to go out down to B&Q and buy some wood and fix it myself? Because I will do. You know, I'll pay for the stuff myself. I just don't think we should do, because it's out there in the public. People are using it, and it is to the point of being a health and safety issue.
Yeah, I understand that. I think it's also the liability implications following doing some repair and remedial work on it. But I'll chase it up tomorrow and I'll come back to you. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you. If we're all done, we'll move on to Mick, please.
An update so far for the last few months and going forward. All highways inspectors and maintenance crews are continuing to work inspecting, fixing carriageway defects, making repairs and make safe Category 1 defects across the whole of the southeast of Northumberland. Gully Emptier is fully deployed, dealing with reported issues and cyclic maintenance. We've completed larger tarmac patching works at St John's Road, Harford Road, Bedlington, Cheevy View, Seg Hill, Exeter Close, the rear of Tintagel Close, Cramlington, and the lower end of Totnes Drive, Cramlington. The rear of Brockwell Centre also, on as Whitson Grove in Bedlington. We've carried out drainage improvement works at Beatty Road in Bedlington, and the area team's continuously looking in programming future planned works to improve both drainage and patching improvements. The LTP schemes have been carried out at Cumbrian Road, Cramlington, Steadley Lane at Bedlington, Bedlington Bank, Beacon Hill in Cramlington. We've also completed the works on the A189 Spine Road, North and Moor Farm Roundabout, Fisher Lane in Cramlington, Nelson Roundabout, and East Harford in Cramlington. We've footway and carriageway LTP resurfacing have been identified and programmed for the following areas: Steadley Lane in Bedlington, Arcade Avenue, and the A192 East Harford. And obviously there's no real winter maintenance update because it's all within the report. The one thing I would say, even after 31 years of being at Northumberland, winter's never not interesting, but we've also now brought in this new system called Exact Track, which means automated gritting and whilst the routes are driven, so you'll get this consistency in routes being done. You'll get the saving that brings. You'll also get gives the driver more time to focus on the driving element. When you a lot of times they're driving 18 and 26 ton vehicles fully loaded, they need to be focused on it. And it also gives us an excellent bit of resilience. If we do have issues with weather, say on the coast, we can bring the vehicles from other areas in because they're all programmed with the routes right across the county. So every vehicle has every single route in the county, both primary, secondary, and some other routes that we're currently looking at. So it's something that's interesting, and we'll probably run that live. And luckily enough, for some, there's a forecast for a bit of snow potentially back end of next week. And that's it.
Thanks, Mick. And I know that with what you mentioned there about the routes, some of the wagons were seen out just a few weeks ago running the routes and testing the equipment, even though I'm aware some of the residents had some unpleasant comments about why we were out gritting in the middle of the day when the weather wasn't bad, but there was a practical reason for that, and this has to be carried out to make sure everything's in place. Do we have any questions for Mick? Councillor Taylor.
Hi, Mick. Two questions. One, have you any update on the speed sign request for Atley Bank in Bedlington?
I passed that on when it was raised to the team, and I'll have to raise that again with them and try and get them to update you.
Thank you. Haven't had anything from that. And the second one was just about what part of the update that you gave before was the resurfacing of Bedlington Bank.
Yes.
It was just on the Blythe side of the bridge. Can I ask, was there any reason why they didn't do something like over the bridge and do up the Bedlington side as well?
That side was done with micro asphalting the year before, and that's still holding quite well considering the stresses a bank of that nature is put under.
Yeah, it is. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Elzel-Shelvin.
Thanks. Just Councillor Taylor's question on traffic signs, speed signs. Is there any study done in our county council whether these signs are effective at all? Like I remember when they put the signs in Catton Way, they did put them to wires to measure what's the speeding frequency and and now they've got one. I would like to know whether, like for example, as a councillor, I would like to spend some money on speed signs. Will that be effective? Because they are very expensive. I would like to see council doing some kind of a study, speed study, after those signs were done, so that we can really see how effective it is before and after.
Thanks for that. A lot of that stuff comes from our integrated transport team. They look and they'll retrospectively review as well. A lot of some of the signs that are really clever now, you can actually switch them off for a short period of time and they still record, and you can download all that information. So a lot of the signs that you see on the side of the road now will tell you the speed that you're going at. They'll record that, but it's interesting that doing the reverse of it when that's actually switched off, then you get a true representation of how these approach. We do that on the when we're doing service dressing right up on the Scottish borders. We switch the signs off and we actually caught one vehicle going through at 92 mile an hour on a 20 mile an hour restriction. So it just shows how people do not take notice of these signs. But yeah, I'll speak to them and I'll find out. I'm sure they do something retrospectively.
Yeah, that would be very helpful, because residents are continuously asking, because my predecessor put it in one street, they all want that to be replicated. But when I look at the cost, and I talk to the residents, and the residents are overwhelmingly, I may be wrong, they say absolutely it made difference at the beginning, because people thought they are going to take a video and then send it to police, but then they realized that evidence is not going to stand up for persecution or fine, even for fine. Now they are back to normal. So I just want to see whether I'm spending my small schemes fund wisely. This kind of information will be very useful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Daly.
Without Daly, nothing moves on.
Right, so that's a really good question from Paul, so I'll make this really brief. What I'd like is a report brought to this committee about speed indicator signs, because for some reason, Cramlington, we've got speedometers, which just record your speed, because that's what we were told was the definitive, that is what you have. But yet I go around the rest of the county. In fact, the approach road to County Hall tonight, you will see a speed indicator sign, which tells you you're going at the right speed and what your speed should be. And in other parts of the county, you've got lovely smiley faces saying, well done, and frowns when you're bad. But for some reason, there seems to be no consistency over what speed indicator signs are in our county. So I would like a report brought on what is a definitive speed indicator sign, what is good practice, and more importantly, I'd like to know why Cramlington's got speedometer signs where we're not apparently allowed to put what speed you should be travelling at, because I've been told that I can't put a 20 mile an hour sign under the speedometer, because that's what it is, sign in my area and in other areas, because we're told that is not compliant with highways. It's crazy. I would just like a report brought, if possible, Chair, because other areas are probably the same. And if we are serious about reducing RTAs and about making our roads safer, then we should have a consistency across our county. So I would just like that as an action, if possible, Chair.
I agree, and as Councillor Daly knows, I had some of those signs put in just before yours did, and been looking to progress some actions in that area. We haven't been able to get the data. The police have been asking for the data. We haven't been able to get the data, and it's only been a couple of weeks ago that they got the software to download that data. So it's been a bit of an issue. Do you have any more questions, Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Chair. Mick, about a year ago we did a bit of work on the road, Shields Road. Yeah. And you had a report done, thank you very much, and the report came back and said the substructure was at fault. You then did a repair patch for us, which more or less satisfied the problems the residents were having. But obviously that road needs to be done, and what you said at the time, if I can remind you, was next year's LTP. You would put it forward for that. We had the LTP meeting on Monday, and it's not part of it. Can you give me an update on it?
I would need to check back with the team, but we tend to, if anything like that we put forward, you know, we will put that forward. It's whether it's scored high enough to get on, and that's all I can really go off at the moment. But I can chase it up and find out why that's not been pushed forward.
Well, the thing I pushed at the meeting on Monday was that road's actually rat run for HGVs now, probably because of sat-navs. And if they want to avoid the main roads, that's the road that they bring them on.
And the biggest thing that road's got against it, and predominantly, it's quite structurally sound. It's just a few areas of localised issues where it could be relating to drainage issues that are causing the fines to be washed out of the lower substructures. It may be something short that could be done, or you could look at something like surface dressing, where if it's the road structurally sound, you can seal it to water ingress, and you can get a lot of longevity out of it from that process, which is a very quick process and has great results. Especially now we're starting to use this process called lock chip, which keeps the surface tight.
Do you have any more? I've got a couple, Mick, which I had raised with Highways Programme, and they said it's up to the area office. Yep. So earlier on this year, I'd requested some street signs that were missing in Cramlington Village, and one to be moved, and it has been followed up. I know Neil Snowden forwarded on an email to the area office, and we've still had nothing. So I'm judging by your face, you're thinking, eh? So, yeah, I'll dig out the email, and I'll pass it on to you.
Yeah, I was going to see if you could forward that directly to me, we'll get it addressed straight away. It seems to have got lost in transit.
Yep, and another one, behind Julie Shops, there's a car park, which is not owned by us, but is in a really poor condition. And I was told that the area office will have to discuss this. I was told the area office is dealing with this regarding liaison with the owner. It's owned by Shenstone. So I was wondering how far we on with these negotiations.
I'll check with Russell Mason, who's the maintenance engineer in the South East who works for us. Russell would have been tasked with that process, but the conversation I remember having with Neil Snowden was that he was looking at it, but we'll take it on board and we'll get it moved forward. Yeah. And speak to Shenstone about that.
Because I appreciate it's not ours,
yeah,
but we just can't ignore it.
Agree with you completely.
Especially seeing as we're relying on that as a park and stride area as well. Yeah, thanks. Okay, if we've no further, thank you, Tony, and thank you, Mick, for your updates and for answering those questions.
Thanks, Chair.
We'll move on to item 14, which is the Local Area Council Work Programme. So you'll see within there's a number of items still to be scheduled. As well as that, January's meeting is the wonderful meeting where we have the budget discussion. You're all looking forward to that one, aren't you? And we also have planned in there, the Police and Crime Commissioner has agreed to attend that meeting. That's as well as the statutory local service updates, etc. Are you okay? Any questions on that item? All right. It is item 15, date of next meeting, but there is something missing out of there, which I'm slipping in, which is any urgent business. Councillor Daly.
Chair, I'm going to be really brief on this. There's two things I want to raise. One is something I would like actioned as a report to this committee. What I want to know is, why does it take such a long time to get road safety schemes actioned? I have a particular issue. It's been a bit of a development today, the 1171 Crowhall Lane, Cramlington, which has been going on for nearly 2 years now. Remarkably, yesterday I received a report telling me what the average speed is, and it says that it should be moved from 60 to 40. Lots of resident complaints, lots of RTAs on there. And I'm told that it's got to be put onto an LTP programme for at some point, possibly for something to happen. Now, my view is that something which is defined as an area, a black spot area in terms of accidents, we should be looking at things a little bit more speedily. So, in effect, what I'm asking for, can we just get an explanation from Highways about why it takes an inordinate amount of time to get some things done? So, if it's capacity, then that's something we should champion through the budget process. But I'd like that. And the second thing, I have tried to get an answer to this question for the past 5 days. So, there's a reason I'm raising it here, which is why I raised it with you, Chair. I've received a number of phone calls from residents in Cramlington, and I know other members have as well, about a transfer of an asset, which is the sporting club in Cramlington to the local academy school. I was not aware of it. Apparently it's common knowledge in Cramlington. Apparently the school knows all about it and have been informing people. As a councillor in Cramlington, I know nothing about it. It is your ward, Chair, and I have tried since the 13th of November with a number of people to get answers to this question. And it's probably a really good idea. It's probably brilliant. But unfortunately, I don't know that. And when I start to get calls from residents asking me what the implication is for Cramlington for a leisure asset that we hold through Active, and I can't get answers from people, then that's the only reason I've raised this tonight. And I did give you prior notice of this, and I know that you, Chair, have also tried to raise this as well. I say it could be a really good idea, but it would just be helpful if this could have been given to elected members in Cramlington as opposed to phone calls from residents who've been told by the local school.
So, firstly, with regard to your first one about Crowhall Lane, I agree. In fact, I think over the past year, on 3 occasions, I have left council meetings and been unable to get home because there's been a serious accident on that road, and there's been a problem. So, we'll look to get a report on that, because this isn't the only issue where there's been extreme delays on getting things resolved. So we'll ask for that. On the sporting club issue, I know you've contacted me on this. On late Thursday afternoon, I received a phone call from one of the heads of the high school, and I'm on the sporting club committee. There was a number of things discussed with regards to the school, and in the conversation, this item was one of them, where I was informed by the head that the school is taking over the running of Cramlington Sporting Club. As you, whilst very informative, I was a little surprised because it's the first I'd heard of it. We've not had a meeting of the Sporting Club for some considerable time. This hasn't been discussed. It's the first I had heard. And to hear it from the school, not through the committee, not through the council, stroke Active, I was a little surprised. I tried to contact the cabinet member by phone, and by email, and through Democratic Services. I asked if somebody could attend from Active tonight, and I've had a phone call to confirm actually what's happening. So, as I've been informed, the sporting club has been run by Active. The area belongs to the school, but it's been run under agreement by Active for some considerable time. They've been looking to take that back in-house for the school on a number of occasions, and have approached again recently to say we think this is the right time to do it because of Active reviewing certain assets. They've now agreed. What will be happening is that there should be no change to any services offered to groups. That will be continuing. As yet, I don't know what will be happening with regards to any committee structure for the running of the sporting club. Anyone who has an active membership who uses the facilities in the sporting club should be contacted to discuss what they wish to do with regards to using those facilities or their membership. And that is as much as I now know after a telephone conversation today. With regards to any other active sites, Northburn, anything else, I have no information, only with regards to the sporting club, in that they're taking it to run with the school, funding, facilities, etc., etc.
Thank you for that, Chair. And again, this could be a fantastic idea, and actually, particularly in terms of the academy, could be a very good news story, particularly if the services is uninterrupted for members of the public. But this is a news story that we should be putting out in a very positive way, if that is the case, as opposed to what is generating as a kind of a rumour mill around the town. So I'm glad that you've got that, and I would hope that we actually can get something positive out on this one then. So thank you for that.
Do you have any more urgent items, Councillor Robinson?
Thank you, Chair. I notice you've got a LAC meeting 22nd of December, planning only. Do you know if there's anything on the agenda? The reason I'm asking is I've requested a call-in on a planning matter to come in front of this committee, and the next one was the 22nd of December.
At this stage, I've got no further information. It's too early to say. We don't normally find out on planning issues until closer to the meeting.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay then. So the date of the next meeting is planned for Wednesday, 22nd December, which is planning only. If I don't see you then, I hope everyone has a great Christmas.
Thank you.
Thank you.